Okay, let's resume. I have the pleasure this afternoon of introducing to you Jonathan Weber, who's the founder of New West. And first of all, I'm going to tell you what Jonathan Weber is not. And he is not, as it says in the bio, a technology expert and analyst at I-Squared, a consulting firm. Jonathan said he's never heard of I-Squared. I haven't either. I don't know. Has anybody heard of I-Squared? So that's what Jonathan Weber is not. Now I'll tell you what he is. He's running a terrific website in Montana called New West. Jonathan has had as many of you know, has had a wonderfully interesting career. We were talking last night about the amazing meteoric rise and fall of Industry Standard that Jonathan ran a few years ago. It was a spectacular publication that sort of was a surrogate, I guess, for the tech rise and fall of that period. And also served 8 years as a writer and editor at the LA Times. I asked Jonathan to come and talk in part because I've been very interested in his own writings and the way his website reflects his writings about the for-profit model and the ways in which he believes an organization such as his needs to piece together pieces of different revenue streams to be successful. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Weber.
Thanks very much, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the great event you put together here. It's been very interesting. It's always great to be back in LA. I will confirm everyone's stereotype about Montana that it is in fact about 2 degrees in Montana right now. So I'm very happy to be here in sunny Southern California. I wanted to do, I'm going to kind of talk about 3 things here. I'm going to start out talking a little bit about the origins of New West, how it started, why it kind of is what it is, why we approach it that way. Second, I'm going to talk in a little bit of detail about our conference business, because I think that's been a very significant piece of our business model. It's been quite successful, and I think there are potentially some good lessons there for others and how to kind of make that part of a media business. So I'll talk about the conferences, and then third, I'll talk about advertising and hyper-local versus regional and some of the issues associated with that. A lot of what I heard this morning certainly confirmed some of my own experiences. So I'll talk about advertising a little bit, and then time permitting, I may just show you a few funny, interesting and entertaining things about New West and the community that we've developed in the Northern Rockies. So I started New West in 2005, and the inspiration was really that I had gone to Missoula after the bankruptcy of the Industry Standard. I was invited to teach at the journalism school at the University of Montana, and I went there to do that. And Missoula is a great place, and I met my wife there and decided to stay there. And a couple of years later, really from when I first got there, I had been very interested in a lot of the issues happening in that part of the country, especially related to growth and change. It's a very fast-changing part of the country, a lot of growth, a lot of development, a lot of issues associated with that. And there isn't really much media there. There's some small local newspapers, obviously, but not much regional media, no regional magazines, very little national press. So there wasn't, I felt like there was a big story of growth and change in the region that wasn't being covered very much. And at the same time, I thought that having followed the development of digital media for a very long time as a reporter and being involved in it at the Industry Standard, I thought that in the kind of mid-2000s with the rise of blogging and other things that the tipping point was really coming in terms of new kinds of media models and the opportunities that might present. I did anticipate that newspapers would be weakening, and that would be part of the opportunity, although I certainly can't say that I would have predicted the kind of the crisis that industry has faced. But that was really the origin of New West, and it was very much a story-driven thing from the beginning, and I think that's very important. We didn't go out to kind of set up a kind of generic news site and then have people kind of come in and write about what they thought was important. We had a very definite point of view about what we thought the big story was and what we thought was important. Now, the structure of it from the start was both local and regional, and because I felt that the story was regional, but at the same time, I was conscious of the fact that most advertising is not regional. Advertising tends to be either local or national, and so I was concerned about getting too far away from the local, and I thought that if there was a way to combine local and regional, that would be a good kind of model. And so we have, so as you see here, so this is the front page. This is regional front page. Right at the moment, it's actually a little bit Montana-oriented, but it's generally, we cover the Rocky Mountain West, and we're especially focused on the Northern Rockies, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado to some degree, a little bit of Oregon, a little bit of Washington. So this is the front page, which is, as you can see, is regional in focus. We have a little bit of aggregation, news headlines on the right, the stuff in the middle, and these featured stories. It's all original content. We do have what I call a pro-am content model, which is that we have professional staff, we have paid contributors, we have unpaid contributors, we have lots of crazy commenters, and we really run the whole gamut of types of content and levels of professionalism. But we do have quite high editorial standards, so anything that you read in kind of core New West, leaving aside the comments, but the stories themselves are all of a certain quality. We do have one of our most successful contributed or citizen journalism type things has been the photos. So we have this photo group, which is actually a Flickr photo group. So we pull these, like, and this is a great example. You know, it's just a great picture out of Utah by a guy named Jerry Stanton, who's one of the members of our Flickr photo group, which has about 800 plus members, and there are currently about 20,000 images in that photo group. And this is a strip. So this strip at the bottom, the photo pool strip just pulls the most recent photos from that group, and then we kind of go into that group and pick a photo for the feature photo of the day. So that's been quite effective. Now this is kind of New West regional, and then we have these topics over here. So these are our core topics: development, politics, travel and outdoors, and books. And those are kind of the things that we cover on a regional basis. Is that me? Oh, that's one of our annoying advertisements. Okay. I accidentally moused over it, I guess. Yeah, I'll talk more about that in a minute. We have the what we call the New West blog, which is kind of more blog-style things, and the I'll just, because it's kind of a funny thing, one thing that's on we have the New West blog, and then we have what we call the community blogs, which are contributed pieces by others. Oh, the piece I thought was there isn't actually there, but I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, so we have regional New West, which is regional news and information about the Rocky Mountain West. Then we have these local sites. So we have local sites currently in 3 communities around the region. So this is the Missoula page. So you can see a little bit of local aggregation, Missoula-focused stories. We have a local events calendar, MissoulaEvents.net. I'll show you this is kind of the calendar. And we have these calendars in 5 markets, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But that's kind of part of the local strategy. And you know, generally speaking, you know, we've been, I think, fairly successful. We've been at it for about 5 years now. We don't have huge traffic numbers. It's not a very heavily populated part of the country. But we generally run about 300,000 page views a month, about 100,000 unique visitors. I'll talk more about the advertising in a second, and how we approach advertising sales and advertising rates. Now, the model has always been based on advertising is kind of the core of the business model, but we always have approached it as a multiple revenue stream endeavor. So we never thought that advertising would be the absolute solution from a business standpoint. And so one of the things we did very early on, and this is really something that I took from my experience at the Industry Standard, where we had very successful industry conferences, which were very complementary to the mission of the magazine. So we developed at New West a conference series, a regional conference series, and I'm just kind of showing you the website of these for a couple of the conferences. Now this was our most recent one. We did it about 6 weeks ago. As you can see, this was the 4th annual, so we've done it almost every year. And it's a thematically focused event, real estate and development in Northern Rockies. We pay a lot of attention to the programming of these conferences. So if you look at the speakers that we have, it's a very good group of speakers, very kind of carefully put together and carefully programmed. We charge, the cost for this conference ranges from, there are discounts for government officials and students and others, and you can go for 1 day or 2 days, and there are a lot of different options. But generally, a ticket price ranges from $120 to about $300, depending on what kind of ticket you get. This event generally draws about 300 people, 300 paid visitors. So if you do the math on that, you know, that's some real money there. And then in addition, we have these sponsors. So you can see the sponsors on the side here, local bank, local planning and construction group. The sponsors pay money, obviously, to be a part of it, ranging from the cheapest sponsorship is $750, and the most expensive sponsorship for this event, I believe, is $6,500. So these conferences are, you know, significant revenue generators for us. You know, this was our 2nd conference, which is on a related theme about design and architecture in the region. It's in a different location. It's in Bozeman, but kind of similar concept. I think we've got a little. Actually, for this conference, one of the things a nonprofit agreed to do some flights so people could actually fly over some of the areas, some of the things that we were talking about. This is just a little slideshow from the conference. But you know, these conferences generate anywhere from overall somewhere between $45,000 and $80,000 in revenue apiece with pretty good margins. So we did 3 of them last year. This year we'll probably do 3, maybe 4. We've also had people approach us to help them do conferences, so that's a bit of a business opportunity. And one thing that is quite important about the conferences from my standpoint as a journalist is that they're very much complementary to the editorial mission. They're about the same things that the website is about. The people who are speaking and are part of the conferences are very much our core audience. The attendees are our core audience. So it's very kind of integrated. I think of them as sort of an in-person version of what we do online. And I also think of the fees that people pay to attend the conference as a little bit like subscription fees. You know, that's what they pay out of their own pocket to be a part of New West and be a part of the New West community. So this has been very important. Conferences probably account for about 40% of our revenue, and we think there's a lot of potential in this business. One of the other things that we do as part of these conferences, and this relates a little bit to a point that somebody made this morning about journalists and universities, is that we offer continuing education credits for various professions. Continuing education is kind of a boom area. There's a lot more professions now require continuing education, and on this conference, for example, we had continuing education for architects, planners, and real estate agents. Now, the nice thing about continuing education is that professionals in those fields are required to get these credits. So they've got to buy them, you know, they've got to pay somewhere, somehow to get these credits. So that's a little bit of a built-in audience. Now, different continuing education things work in different ways. The real estate credits you can get very cheaply in Montana, so you know we're way more expensive than the generic continuing education. On the other hand, it's a way better experience. Architects, on the other hand, there are very few opportunities for continuing ed for architects in Montana. So if you don't want to fly to the annual AIA conference, you can get some of your continuing ed at our conference. And so this very much, I think, I do think that media organizations and educational organizations have a lot of things that, a lot of common interests and common themes, and this is one of the areas in which I see convergence. You know, when you look at the Washington Post company, which now makes all of its money on Stanley Kaplan, and while there isn't really much integration between Stanley Kaplan and the Washington Post, I find it. I don't think it's coincidental that those two companies are under the same roof, and so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. We've looked at doing, you know, touring events. I mean, if you start to think about this in more detail, you know, there is really a tremendous amount that you can do. Specifically with continuing education, you can do touring events that, you know, go around. You can do smaller seminars. You can do all kinds of stuff. Just to show you on the real estate conference. So on this one we have planners, planners, architects, lawyers, Montana real estate agents, Idaho real estate agents. You know, it's actually a big field and growing fast, and something that I kind of recommend that people look at. Now, to talk a little bit about so that's a big piece of the business model. Now, advertising is the core of the model, and as I said at the outset, our initial idea had been that, well, advertising is local, and as you know, in Peter's presentation, you know, $150 billion in local advertising spend. Nobody's been successful really in cracking the local online advertising business. There have been a lot of money lost going after that opportunity. If you go back to, you know, Sidewalk and City Search and all kinds of things that have been tried, and a lot of people have lost a lot of money on that. And what I've discovered is that there are good reasons for that. Local advertising is a very tough game, and the thing that's really a killer about it, which is probably not what some people in this room at least really would like to hear, but the truth is that it's very hard to sell local advertising profitably because they're just the ticket price isn't high enough. You know, if you sell a $300 ad, I mean, if you think about it, a $300 ad, if you make one sales call and you make 2 phone calls and you have your designer design an ad, you've already lost money on that. You know, so it's a kind of an uneconomic proposition, and we have not really been able to crack that nut. You know, that's why self-serve, and this was discussed a little bit this morning, so people look at self-serve and say, well, that's going to be the answer to local. And, you know, maybe it will be, but you know, so far it certainly hasn't been. Local advertisers, they get, you know, businesses in Missoula, you know, on a daily basis, they get visits from the newspaper, from the radio stations, from the TV stations, from us, from the Yellow Pages. You know, it's not like nobody's coming to sell these people advertising. So people show up to sell them advertising, and that's what they expect. Somebody's going to show up and sell them an ad. And so if you say, well, you know, you need to go and buy your own ad, that's a big leap, and most companies are not going to do that. And that may change. You know, Peter mentioned, well, maybe if Google AdSense AdWords is going to train people to do it themselves, and that may be the case, but certainly not something that we've seen. Managing local sales forces, one thing that I've discovered that I'm especially bad at, actually, is sales management. I can sell things myself, but sales management is very tough. There's huge turnover, as Chris was talking about. You know, finding the people who can do this effectively and managing them effectively and having a compensation model that works for everyone is very hard. There's huge turnover. You know, these businesses are used to seeing, you know, a different salesperson from the radio station every other week. You know, it's just a tough game, and it has nothing to do with journalism. As a journalist, you know, it's just something that part of the problem probably is that I don't have that much of a feel for it. But it's just a very tough business, and you know, nobody in the local ad business makes a lot of money. The only reason that local newspapers and TV stations used to make a lot of money on it is because they were monopoly providers, but that's not the case anymore. So now you've got this extremely competitive environment, and if you're going to have your own sales force, to sell, $300 ads to local businesses, you really need to know what you're doing, and for us, it has not really worked very well. So we've kind of been shifting the model a little bit and focusing much more on a smaller number of higher value advertisers that are buying long-term contracts, that are paying a higher price. We do get very good CPMs for our ads. This premium position here, we typically get a $20, $30 CPM on that ad. The one on the left here, this is probably closer to 10 or 20. We sell it on a kind of a hybrid flat rate CPM basis. We'll quote a flat rate, but it's based on a CPM. And that's actually been proving to be much more successful because there's a lot less overhead involved. A lot of it is through agencies, so they do a lot of the hand-holding with the customers. You can kind of make a decision as to, on a hyper-local level, one route that you can go is to say, well, we're going to be the agency, and we're going to be the online marketing partner for small businesses, and we're going to work with them and advise them and teach them how to do this and that. And that's, that's a model that we kind of thought might work for a while, but then we really decided that ultimately that was not our expertise. We're not an ad agency. It's a different skill set. We don't want to compete with the agencies, which is also an issue. So, a lot of the advertising you see on here does come through agencies. So this one is through a regional agency in Bozeman. This is through an agency in Missoula. The annoying lottery ad you saw a minute ago, that's out of an agency in they're actually in Bend, Oregon. But some of those state, in these small states, those state government accounts and stuff, which the lottery is, those are quite good. So we're really aiming to have a small number of high-value advertisers that have contracts for at least 3 months, hopefully for the whole year, and that are spending a minimum of $700 a month with us. And that's kind of our baseline target. And if we can do that, that will add up much better for us, and we're not really going to be so much in the game of of trying to sell a $200 ad to every business in town. And as part of that strategy, we've always had, in addition to the calendar, so we have kind of New West regional, New West local. We have the conference business. We have the event calendar. We also had in Missoula for a while. We had a small indoor advertising business. Meaning ads in like bathrooms and locker rooms and stuff like that. So that, we thought that was kind of synergistic because we could promote our own stuff and it's a little bit of revenue. And we actually, that business came about because the person who was selling ads for us part-time at the very beginning, she had this little business doing indoor advertising. And so I said, well, Ingrid, why don't you just come on full-time and we'll take over your business. And so we did that. So we had really what I sometimes refer to as this sort of teeny tiny media conglomerate. We a very small company with 5 employees, but we had like 5, 6 different businesses, and so I decided relatively recently that was not, that we were too distracted, that we had too much going on that wasn't yielding enough revenue, and so we decided basically to we ended up selling this business. So the calendar and the indoor business we sold to one of the employees who had been running this thing. So he bought it. So this is, even though you see here it's still part of New West, but it's not really, or in the future it'll still be closely associated, but it's a separate business. So we actually sold this business, and we've now started to think and focus much more on the content side. Going back to what do we really do well? What are we good at? Well, we're good journalists. We're covering a very interesting story that's undercovered. We have a lot of great contributors. We have some very good staff people who do great stuff. We have some very good contributors that write relatively cheaply. We have our community bloggers, as we call them, which is a group of contributors who write about a wide range of stuff. These are all our community blogs over here you see on the right. So people contribute anywhere from, I'd say most of them probably write around once a week, something like that. They get paid a small amount of money, generally $10 a post. We have a little bonus system, so the community blogger gets the most traffic every month gets a $100 bonus. So we have some little incentives like that. But these are people that we kind of recruit by hand. You know, you can't just sign up for your own blog. These are people that we've decided are interesting. And we've done very well, you know, with certain content areas in particular. So, for example, I personally have spent a lot of time covering the crisis in the resort business and the bankruptcy of the Yellowstone Club and Moonlight Basin. This is another resort up there that's in bankruptcy. This is a story I was just finishing last night as I came in about the bankruptcy of this resort. And these stories, you know, there's tremendous interest, a relatively small audience, but passionately interested in this. And this is where I've been thinking a little bit about paid subscription models. I don't think that paid models are viable as a general matter, you know, to require people to sign up for New West. But on specialty content, like this kind of stuff, you know, my coverage, and this is not to boast, but just is what it is. You know, I mean, my coverage on this stuff is way, way better than what anyone is going to get anywhere else. And the people who care about this care a lot, matters a lot to them from a financial point of view. And so I think that I think people would pay for that. When I was covering the Yellowstone Club bankruptcy, which was a pretty high-profile story, and there was one part of the bankruptcy proceeding that was actually a trial. It was called an adversary proceeding between Credit Suisse and Tim Blixit, the founder. And I actually set up a Twitter feed to do a live Twitter feed of the trial, and we had, I think, 600 people signed up for that feed within a day. So, you know, that was an indication of the tremendous interest that there was. Again, a relatively small audience, but those people really cared, and they would have happily paid $50 a month for my coverage. So if I could figure out a way to get those people to pay what they're willing to pay, I think that could be interesting. I don't know how to do that exactly, but I'm thinking about it. Incidentally, the Twitter feed got shut down by the judge after one day because some of the lawyers on one side, you know, didn't like me, and they, but this is a little bit of an aside, but the interesting thing about the Twittering of the trial is that people think about Twittering as like real-time news. So, and there was a similar thing where people were Twittering another trial, and they would sort of report the testimony. It was almost a live transcription of the testimony, but that isn't actually the way I did it. What I did was, it was much more of kind of commentary on what was going on. So I would say, oh, the judge said this, you know, that's a big victory for Tim, you know, or I'd kind of give my little 2 cents. And frankly, I think the reason ultimately that the judge shut it down was there was wireless in the courtroom, and there were a lot of people in this courtroom, including about 40 lawyers, and everybody was reading my Twitter feed in real time, so it was very kind of distracting. So I think that's ultimately why they shut it down. But just to you know, the flip side from a business model standpoint, if you look at this ad here, this is a construction company in Big Sky, and this guy called up because of the Yellowstone Club coverage, and he said, you know, everybody I know is reading your coverage of this thing, so I want my ad right there, you know. So we sold it to him, and he pays a premium for that spot to be right next to that particular kind of coverage. So I remain very much a believer in the value of quality content. I mean, if you do good journalism, it's going to draw an audience, and there are going to be ways to monetize it. Now, you know, that's an easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do. You know, so whether that really, you know, I don't really have a secret for the business model, and you know, New West is essentially a break-even company at this point. You know, we all bust our asses. It's been very hard work, and again, you know, I don't think that I've got, you know, some kind of magic formula for success, but I do think that what we've done shows that quality content will draw an audience, and will draw a high-value audience that you can that you can then turn around and sell ads against. You can attract people to conferences. You can market ancillary products that you can make money on because you have that high-value audience. And so if you can figure out how to kind of put some of these pieces together, that can add up to I think to a pretty decent business. One thing I will also mention that was mentioned earlier which I do think is very important, is the kind of the staying power, the brand building of you as a brand is a big deal, and we've gotten a lot more business in the last 18 months just because we've been around for a while. You know, so at the beginning, people kind of take the view of, okay, well, these things come and go, and media, I mean, online aside, but media publications of all kinds come and go all the time. And so advertisers generally take a somewhat cautious view, and especially on online things, you know, they say, oh yeah, this website, well, it looks nice, it's pretty, but does anyone care? And after you've been around for 3 or 4 years, they kind of say, okay, yeah, well, you guys have really been around, and you know, you start to have that brand presence, and you get a lot more credibility. So that, and this was mentioned by a couple of folks earlier, and I think is very much the case, that staying power matters and will redound to your benefit over time. As you can see, you know, we paid a lot of attention to design. We wanted to have kind of not a, you know, bare bones sort of bloggy looking thing, but much more of a sophisticated design heavy or relatively design heavy thing, because we thought that that would be appealing both to readers and advertisers, and I think that that has been worth the effort. Now we do have, just to mention a couple of other things about on the content side, we do have something we thought at the beginning that contributed journalism, citizen journalism, would be more important than it turned out to be. So we do still have this section we call Unfiltered. So anybody who wants to kind of sign up, you have to register to do this. You can sign up to contribute, but we don't do much with it. As you can see, there's a handful of people who like to do it. They do get some traffic and some this guy is a retired college professor who likes to write about random stuff, and this guy is a very vociferous environmental advocate who writes a lot about forest issues. But this has turned out to be much less important than we thought it would, so we've sort of downplayed it a little bit. The comments sections, on the other hand, are very lively. We don't require real names. This comment thread, this is a kind of an example of the, and I'll just show this because it's sort of interesting, but this is a piece that I wrote. So I was walking my dog on Thanksgiving, and he got caught in a trap, in a foothold trap. And trapping is kind of an issue in Montana and other western states. So, so I wrote this little, basically a blog post about my dog getting caught in a trap with this picture. And the comment thread on here is just, so you can see there's 155 comments. The first commenter, of course, says, you know, and I knew this was coming. I knew that this is the kind of issue that brings all the crazies out of the woodwork. So first comment is, it's your fault. You know, you were trespassing. Then we get into a long thing, and I won't go through it all, but there are 3 or 4 people on here who say that I staged the whole incident, that it was all fake, in order to develop, you know, support, because there is an initiative on the ballot to ban trapping on public land in Montana. So they say, well, see, if you look at the picture, that trap is new, it's not rusty, which actually it is, but they say the trap's too new, it couldn't really have been set, it was obviously staged, you know, on and on. So, and I did manage to steer the comment thread back a little bit to a more substantive conversation about trapping and the appropriate laws around trapping and things like that. But to me, you know, the trapping is a very kind of New West issue. It has to do with the change in the region, the change in values. You know, there used to be no people. You know, nobody walked their dogs out in the woods because there were no people, and the people that were there were trapping, not walking their dogs. You know, but it's a very kind of New West issue, because now a lot of people use these public lands, and they're not expecting there to be a trap that their dog could get caught in. You know, that's just so. So we get, you know, a lot of engagement around these kinds of issues, especially. Sometimes it's more productive than other times, but we do have a very vibrant community of commenters. So that pretty much covers the main points I wanted to talk about. I guess the oh yeah, there was one more point that relating to the local advertising business that I want to mention. And people have taught. We have the event calendar, and event calendars are great for traffic, but things like classifieds, directories, and those things, I think it's very tough. We've experimented a little bit with classifieds, very little traction. If you can't get traction on free classifieds, then if it's a business thing, then what are you doing? I mean, because even the theory is you got lots of people that free classifieds, and then after a while you start charging. But if you can't even get them to come to free in large numbers, you're never going to get them to charge. I think classifieds is a done business. Nobody is ever going to make any money in classifieds again. Directories, similarly, I don't think there's a business there. Google is, search engines are universal directories. So, the theory of a business directory is if you want to find a plumber in Missoula, you go to our directory and you look under category plumbers, and then you get this list of plumbers. But what people really do is that they type in Missoula plumbers into Google. So how does a directory compete with that? I don't know. I'm very skeptical. So we've experimented with also with a couple of directory things, but I really have my doubts. So those are some of the challenges I really see. Some of these on listings related, directory related kinds of things. It's very hard to beat search, and so I think from a publishing standpoint, you really got to steer kind of around those areas because it's just going to be hard to make money in that kind of stuff. So, Peter, I see you looking skeptical about my directory comments, but...
Well, waiting for a small publisher to make money theoretically and to gain traction with a directory is to include all what we call copy points that they can do that Google cannot do for Mountain View. So you can figure out which foreign languages are spoken, which credit cards are taken, what hours are open. All this stuff is not easily searchable. And you can do that there in some of your smaller towns. That's not.
Okay, so I'm happy to take questions. Yeah.
For your the conference business and the credits that you gave, is the conference the way to get credits, or are they separate content? If I want
no, you go to the conference and you get credit. Okay, so we have to get the conference. There's some administration involved, so we go to the provider, to either the Board of Realty or the American Institute of Architects or whoever is the certifying body for continuing education. We become a certified provider, and then you get the credits by attending our conference. And then we have to report back to the certifying body that this person came and they get these credits.
Sometimes the continuing education is kind of technical, not of interest to the general audience. But also, have you ever noticed any conflicts between the people who your sponsors for the conference and your choice of speakers? In other words, is there like...
Yeah, that's a good question, our stated position is that conference programming and sponsorship are separate. It's kind of church and state. If we want you on the program, we want you on the program regardless of whether you sponsor. And just because you can't buy a spot on the program by sponsoring. So that's the official position. I will say that in reality, if somebody's buying a platinum sponsorship for $6,500 and they want one of their people on one of the panels, we'll try to make that happen. That's just, and again, I think we do that in a way, if it's really inappropriate, we won't do it. We won't give someone the spot just because they bought a sponsorship. But if they bought a big sponsorship and they have somebody who's qualified to be part of the program, we'll try to make that happen.
You can choose somebody, and then their company goes, oh, well, they're speaking? Well, in that case, we'll buy a sponsorship because our person is highlighted.
That happens also,
Gabriel Martinez. From the legal side, do you have to get, and I'm sure this varies state by state, do you get to get any license, any permit for this event? Or license for internet itself?
I'm not sure what you mean. What?
Yes.
For continuing education or
for for the website itself, and also for the event that you do. Do you need to get any permit, any permission from the government? You don't have to register your website?
Well, we have to. Well, there's certain. You have to register. I mean, we have there's a state business registration. So we're registered as a business in Montana. we're a LLC, a limited liability company, so there's a registration associated with that, business registration. But that's a routine thing. I mean, that's a $20 form that you send in every couple of years. So but no, there's no real. And then, you know, we have trademark, you know, we have copyrights and trademarks and things like that we have done legal work to protect our trademarks and assert our trademarks and so forth. But it's not really permission of the government exactly.
You mentioned that you have good margins on your conferences. Can you give me a sense of what a good margin is?
Well, you know, I mentioned what the total revenue was, and the sort of hard costs are about half that. So, yeah, Vince?
My exact question, I mean, having organized events, very labor intensive. You do a lot of staffing to organize. Is it still make money on these events?
Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, you know, if you think, you know, if you again, you know, if your gross margin is, you know, is $30,000 or $40,000, it doesn't, and especially because we have you know, we have systems. You know, we have, say, the website. You know, we've got a pretty robust, sophisticated conference website that we've built. We don't have to rebuild that every time. We just have to, you know, redo the content every time. We've got a very experienced conference manager. We've got a lot of connections. Also, the one thing actually that I should mention in this regard is that conferences get more profitable the more often you do them, because you have to do less marketing. They're less work each time. So by the time you're at the 4th annual, you know, it definitely doesn't cost us $40,000 in staff time to produce a conference, because we've done a lot of them. We know what we're doing. We've got a lot of the systems in place, got a lot of the design in place, you know. So yeah. Yeah. Jesus?
Why did you think the citizen journalism thing was the most successful, and how do you differentiate those versus the bloggers you pay?
I'm sorry, the second half of it?
How do you differentiate the citizen journalists from the bloggers you pay?
Well, the unfiltered, as we call it, is just, you know, anyone, if you're a registered user of New West, you can come in and write in the unfiltered section. The community blogs, you know, people have their own, people have kind of their own page, you know, and their own blog, and, you know, so you've got Bob Wire. So, you know, here's Bob Wire's page and his recent posts, and, you know, so that's it's a more robust thing, and I actually haven't seen this one. Bob is kind of a humor columnist. He's a funny guy, and so that's sort of the distinction. So we've decided, okay, Bob, we want you as a community blogger. We're going to set you up with your own page. We're going to pay you a little bit for your stuff. Bob, by the way, as a humor columnist, he actually managed to get one of our larger advertisers canceled because he did a piece making fun of Easter as a holiday. The headline was "Easter, the most bogus of holidays," and it was a very funny piece, but the local electronics store didn't agree.
Yeah. Let's take one more question.
Yep.
I had the opportunity to travel the American West this summer, and I spent quite a bit of time in all of your markets. And while I was there, I noticed that you know, wireless was difficult to come by. The newspapers seem to be doing a little better than they are here in California. And when I asked about local online sites, I would usually get a blank look. And so my question is, I wonder if you think that in geography, maybe slightly more conservative political mentalities have made it harder for you to build an audience?
I think yes is the short answer. You know, I think the internet access, there's some issues in the more rural areas, although not so much in the main towns. But it's generally just much less technologically savvy than California, you know, so people don't, you know, like, Twitter is kind of a good example. I mean, you know, in Missoula, like, people don't really spend a lot of time with Twitter. You know, it's just not high, you know, I mean, some people do, you know, there is a community that cares about that stuff, but it's just nothing like it is in California. So I think there are definitely obstacles in that regard.
Jonathan, terrific. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going back into our lightning rounds here. Louis, we'll start with you, Louis Freedberg, who is the director of California Watch, which many of you know is a bright new star in the California scene and big, fairly big, robust investigative reporting operation that's affiliated with the Center for Investigative Reporting. So, Louis, we'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You sit it up?
Yeah.
Sit up here. Well, great to be here, and David, thanks for pulling this together. You know, I think some of the literature, you said this was a landmark event, and I think it is, to have regional and local blog sites all in the same room. Although it is kind of salutary that in a state of 38 million people, there's not more local blog sites. So, you know, that says something about the challenges as well as the potential. You know, the other thing that is also very salutary is that we're experiencing this huge crisis in the media at the very same time that California and the country is in a huge, gigantic crisis. That this is precisely the time when we need a really vibrant, active, watchdog press. And I think we all are suffering that in light of the downsizing of the media. So I'm going to talk fast, and please, you know, feel free to ask me any other questions later. But we're in a very fortunate position. California Watch, which is based at the Center for Investigative Reporting in Berkeley, was able to get support from 3 foundations: the Knight Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, the Irvine Foundation. We were very fortunate to have started discussions with these foundations before the major economic crash last fall. So we kind of had our foot in the door. The foundations were interested in what we were doing. And so we kind of got in just by the skin of our teeth. I think if we had approached them now, it would have been a much more difficult situation. So we feel very fortunate to have actually gotten some resources to get this project off the ground. And I do want to segue from the last presentation by Jonathan, where he talked about the importance of content and the potential that content can drive an audience and the potential to monetize that. And so what we're into is content. California Watch, we've been able to hire, amazingly, we were able to hire 6 reporters, 2 multimedia producers. Mark Katchis is a leading investigative reporter from Orange County Register, originally was in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. He's the editorial director. And we actually opened a small Sacramento bureau. We have 3 reporters up there. The editor is Bob Saladay, who was at the San Francisco Chronicle, and subsequently was at the LA Times running their political blog. He's overseeing the Sacramento bureau. First time, I think, in a half dozen years that there's been a bureau opened in Sacramento. I think, as you probably all know, the trend has been in totally the opposite direction. Many bureaus have closed. So we are now beginning to produce material. And we're hoping that we can really collaborate with all of you in this room. Because there are 3 guiding principles for the work that we're doing. One is collaboration. And I think this is something that I think is being embraced both in the mainstream media, but
also in the emerging online media. Our view, and this is based on conversations with people all across the state, is that we've got to figure out how to localize these issues. How do you take state-level issues and localize it? Show people how does this affect them in their schools, in their parks, in their quality of air, in the sense of how safe they feel when they leave their front doors. So that's going to be a key part of what we do. It won't be in every story, but we're going to try to take state-level issues and localize it. And again, that's where I think many of you in this room can come in. If we're doing these state-level issues, perhaps you could run these stories on your site, perhaps fill in some of the pieces, the blanks that we're unable to fill in. And perhaps even collaborate with us in the reporting of some of these stories, because even though we've got a half dozen reporters, which we hope to build on, that's minuscule to cover the state the size of California. By the way, it's more than one state. There's several states. And so that's an additional challenge. How do we cover all the regions? We can't do it, but our thinking is if we can get common issues that cross-cut regions, there's potential to engage Californians in this. The third piece of this that we're really grappling with is impact. How do you have an impact in the state the size of California, particularly in a news landscape that's fragmented? People are getting their news from numerous different sources. The dominant media outlets still have impact, but far less than they used to have. And so that is a real challenge. So one of our thinking, the thinking that we've kind of tried to put into operation is, can we, when we do a story, can we get it out to as many different outlets at more or less the same time? Ideally on the same day, but let's say within a week of when we put out a story. Can we get it out in multiple media outlets? So it's not just print, but it has to be television, radio, online outlets, also distributing it in non-conventional ways. So in this story, which I'll just go through, that actually I did and my colleague Hugo Cabrera on increasing class sizes at K-3 schools, we sent out the story to PTAs around the state, to education organizations, to try to break through some of the traditional distribution mechanisms. Our thinking is if you want to have an impact, and I think that's why a lot of us went into journalism, was to have an impact, that the people who are actually responsible for making decisions on some of these things, they don't need more information. They need to feel some pressure. They need to feel some sense that people at the grassroots are concerned about this. And our thinking is if they see stories appearing in numbers of media outlets around the state, that they're more likely to pay attention. So if I could just go really quickly, we did this story. There has been some reporting on increasing class sizes around the state as a result of the budget crisis. But we looked at this, there's this program that started in 1996 to decrease class size to 20 kids around the state. And since 1996, it's the biggest reform in California, education reform in California's history. It's spent $22 billion on this program so far. And as I say, there had been some reports in local districts, but nobody had really looked at the statewide picture. So we did a survey of let's see. So this was the story. How do I go back? We did a video, pretty basic. We interviewed teachers in elementary school here in LA at Plummer Elementary School who are dealing with these bigger class sizes. And this was what was kind of I think made it into a story. We surveyed the top 30 school districts around the state to find out what was happening in each one of these school districts. So you could go into each one of these and see what was happening in those school districts. So this immediately created, by doing this, there were 25, 30 communities around the state that could go onto this and see what was happening. We also did a multimedia piece how you could see how California's student-to-teacher ratio is compared to the rest of the country. You can see it's 49th. That's at the bottom end. So if you are from Montana, for example, Jonathan, you could see that Montana is doing pretty well compared to California. One reason to be in Montana, smaller class sizes. So then where did the story appear? I should also mention that this is our interim website. We're working on a new website. Susan Mernert is here, has been doing fantastic work for us. That's going to be coming out hopefully in the first week or two of January. But so where did the story appear? We just contacted a bunch of newspapers around the state. I won't say a bunch of newspapers. These are media partners that we've been working with. Let's see. So these are some of them. The Modesto Bee they ran this on their front page. They did a terrific sidebar. The LA Daily News ran it on the top of the fold here. San Diego Union Tribune. They put on their own material, did a sidebar. The Oakland Tribune, as you see, ran it there. We also, 2 TV stations.
Shows how the economic crisis is having a serious
This is
impact
KGO
on
in San Francisco.
Most of the largest districts are increasing class size in kindergarten through 3rd grade, eroding the most expensive education reform in state history. Dan Noyes has this I-Team report in conjunction with Cal Watch. That's a nonprofit consortium of investigative reporters out of Berkeley.
I won't play the whole thing, but this was a great report that Dan Noyes, who's the head of the investigative team. We also had a TV station in Sacramento also did a piece which was very good for us because policymakers, they tend to watch that. And then the other thing we also have is we've worked out a collaborative arrangement with KQED, which does the California report, which is distributed to 28 public radio stations. We actually jointly fund a reporter that's turning our stories into, let's see if we can,
Our next story today begins a new initiative. We're teaming up with reporters at California Watch. That's a project of the Center for Investigative Reporting. In the coming months, we'll be investigating issues ranging from healthcare and government oversight to the environment. First, a story about education and the dismantling of the most expensive school reform in state history. Michael Montgomery reports.
As schools around the state opened for business this fall, many families were in for an unpleasant surprise. Early elementary classes in many school districts have swelled to levels not seen in more than a decade.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of kind of the range. We were also on numbers of websites and blog sites. So, I think this gives you an idea of some of the potential to try to get a discussion going of key issues across the state. And so I'm hoping that each one of you are doing local websites that we could figure out some way to collaborate, share this material, because you are obviously critically important in the whole new media landscape.
Very good. Questions for Liz?
I think the toughest transition in terms of collaborating is to television, I assume, correct? Because you're not, you can provide print and the newspapers can just print. And blogs, just, put a link. And even radio, it's easy to read. So I would imagine TV is the toughest enough to crack for you. And how did that work? Did KGO just take your content and decide and just go out and shoot what they wanted to make the story happen for television? Or did you help them with particular schools to go to and sources? Did you shoot anything for them that they used? How did that work?
Maybe you should just tell folks what you're working with, because we have the anchor of this terrific local regional SoCal connected to KCET, which is doing great local reporting. And we want to work with you too, and you have to figure out how to do it. Yeah.
That's
so could
the
you just tell folks?
Yeah, well, we have a weekly news magazine called SoCal Connected, and it's very much, it's a half-hour in-depth. We do some investigative stuff as well. And we see all these great nonprofit sites popping up and all this content, but getting it onto TV is an expensive and awkward, and as of yet I haven't seen any really great collaborations work. I think it's about time we really work it out. So, I'd love to take some of these, but it means that we have to decide to invest in all the, you know, the shooting and the editing and so forth.
Yeah, well, let me just say, yeah, TV is another animal. We're working it out. It's actually worked out very well because we have done a lot of the legwork. So the TV folks, and they have an investigative team, but they're able to take some of the material. They can actually go to some of the same sources, the teachers we interviewed. And so it's actually, they don't have to start from scratch. And so I think that's one of the great things with this collaborative. So if we don't have to start from scratch, if everybody's not doing the same legwork to get the story to, you know, the next base, we're all saving money that way. So, for us, the advantage, we can get TV, we can maybe use some of the video to put up on our website because we don't really do video. I mean, I took these things with a little flip camera. It was amazing it came out as well as it did. But that's not really a model for, you know, for doing really high quality video.
Ideally, as these sites develop, clearly with television being kind of hungry, well, I think it's hungry for video. I mean, if you were able to do a broadcast quality 2-minute story and made it available to TV stations throughout California, wouldn't that be a terrific way to get it out there and make it easy? You know, because TV stations, we're lazy. I mean, you know, in terms of a regular news gathering, newscast, we're notoriously lazy. That's why you see so much crime, because it's so quick and easy and down and dirty. So giving them something that's already made, I would think they would just, you know, eat it up.
Well, you and I should talk more.
We should. I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love to talk about actually translating. There's tremendous, wonderful stuff in print and on the web, but it's not getting through to television. And despite the growth of, you know, the hype around the internet, people still watch a lot of TV. So yeah, we should.
Would the station take raw video and produce it now?
The question is, would their station take raw video?
Exactly. My first question is, what is the broadcast quality? Because, you know, if it's well lit and well shot, and then we have the whole problem of all these formats. We're 16 by 9 inches, right? And there's a zillion formats, and some are not as good as others. So there's all these technical. So the answer is, I have to see it first. To see it for
Let's take one more.
Yes.
It really follows on that. The question I had was, working with a number of different media companies, we spent a lot of time on content creation, and this is great work, and I'd love to see the work here, and the mission is terrific. I'm thrilled with this project. But over time, when I work on an operating plan for an organization like this, it's like, at some point you have to staff presentation and distribution, not just creation and reporting, in order to connect with TV stations. And my question before that was, what is the plan to, you know, basically there's a distribution as sort of the plug, and then there's the socket, but what's the charge that, you know, are we willing to build the thing that ties them together, and what's the operating plan around that in the future? And I guess the question...
How do you mean the socket? What do you mean by that?
Well, there's distribution, all the places you want to be, and then there's all the content you're creating. I find in most newsrooms I work with today, the question that I add to a news meeting is, okay, what story are we doing today? Who's doing it? When's it going to be done? And then you ask, who's going to be interested in it? And then how are we going to get it to them? And who's going to get it to them? And those last 3 steps are the new ones that don't fit into traditional roles that are taught or staffed.
I'm hoping that we can, what we are doing is going around the state, talking with people. I was just in the Inland Valley. I was in Palm Springs yesterday, talking to the Desert Sun. All these papers in the Inland Valley, which we really had very little outreach to, but just to, you know, it's still with all this, you know, internet potential, there's nothing like a face-to-face conversation. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, is so we can meet. And for any of you who want to be partners, I'm hoping you'll all sign up to be partners with this, so we can figure out. And listen, some of this will be done on a story-by-story basis. You know, I think in 6 months, a year or 2, we may have our distribution network all set up. We can just kind of send it out, kind of like Jonathan with these conferences. But right now, it's it's kind of a labor-intensive, but it's also and face-to-face. You know, because there's a level of trust here. By the way, we have to trust that when we give you something, that you're not going to ruin the story. You know, and put something in there. And you have to trust us that what we give you doesn't have errors and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a collaboration. Sounds great, but the devil is in the details. You know.
Louis, thank you very much.
Can I just say one last thing? I forgot to mention the other thing we did was working with Sandy Close at New American Media, that we actually Sandy, New American Media, translated the stories into Korean, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Spanish, and we distributed to the ethnic media and got pretty good pickup. So part of the challenge is how do we get to all communities in California.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. It occurred to me on Lewis's website, it says that California Watch has the largest investigative reporting team in the state, and it occurred to me that we're going to see more and more nonprofits making that claim in states over time. We already have statewide investigative nonprofits operating in places like Massachusetts and Wisconsin and so on, and I suspect this will be a spreading phenomenon. Ben? Okay. So Ben, why don't you come up? Ben Ilfeld is the co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of Sacramento Press. Ben, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. Actually, well, here it is, I guess. This is the Sacramento Press, and I'll just keep it as a backdrop for right now. But actually, I'm here for the first time to talk about something that's really not the Sacramento Press. I'm here to talk about the Sacramento Local Online Advertising Network, which is an idea we've been chewing over for at least a year. And we've had a partner in the Rancho Cordova Post and the founder of the Rancho Cordova Post, Jeffrey Sakala, in actually making it a reality since probably last, I guess, June or July. And so at the beginning he said, well, let's get together and do something that kind of benefits us both. And so we started talking about our pain points. The Rancho Cordova Post is probably a lot like some of the blogs here, actually. Let me bring that up too. Okay, is that right? Did I add an extra? 2 V's. 2 V's. Nervous fingers. Sorry. So as Rancho Cordova Post comes up, so we had already been kind of meeting with everybody else, even before we launched the Sacramento Press, in the hyper-local space. Let me back up just a second. I'm going to explain really quickly. The Sacramento Press is, if you don't know, we're a hyper-local online newspaper. We do citizen journalism. We have paid staff reporters. We have interns. We pay freelancers. We do whatever it takes to cover local in Sacramento. So Rancho Cordova Post is a blog, and it is primarily driven by a couple of reporters who write for this blog, but they also take some citizen journalism entries and add them as well. And then we have all these other cool things that are happening in Sacramento. What you find out in local and hyperlocal actually is the more time you spend in a specific market, the more cool things you uncover that you never have thought of before or heard of. I mean, in Sacramento alone, we've got the Natomas Buzz that covers a particular region, the West Sac Web that covers a particular region, Rancho Cordova Post, Elk Grove Online, Elk Grove Citizen, Gold River Online, My Folsom, My Eldorado Hills, Sac Rag, Sac Mix, Downtown Grid and Midtown Grid, and now Arden Downtown Grid. So, I'm sure none of you have heard any of these names. You'd think, okay, Sacramento, there's just one cool thing going on. It's the Sacramento Press. Well, when you're in Sacramento and you're us, you get to meet everybody else that's involved. And it's actually a really vibrant local media ecosystem. Some of us focus on entertainment, others focus on news. Some have paid staff reporters, some are amateurs. Some people have a sales staff, some people don't. Some people do it as a living. Some people make money because having built a really cool web application like the Gold River Online or the Elk Grove Online, it was a couple of people who are web developers, and they build infrastructure and web applications. So they built stuff for their neighborhoods, but of course that got them extra publicity so that when, well, 2 things happened. One is they got leads for new business. Decision makers in state politics and in large businesses took notice of their web applications and said, hey, let's see if we can do something together. And second, when they went out for new business, if someone asked them how stable and robust their applications were, they could say, we'll just go to Elk Grove Online and see how stable it is. It's been running since 1999 or however long it's been running. So, so you have this whole mix of how people do it, why they do it, what their incentives are to do it, what their revenue structures are. But the funny thing is, if you talk to all of them, they'd all like to make a little bit more money. Many would like to take it from a part-time to a full-time. Many would like to see a second revenue channel. With the Sacramento Press, we had a very specific need. We have gone out and sold $300 ad packages locally, and it's gotten us part of the way there. And we go out and sell social media consulting, and that gets us part of the way there because it's actually higher value. And we do on-the-ground events, and that gets us part of the way there with event sponsorships and guerrilla marketing. But one of the toughest nuts to crack were regional advertisers who were still paying $5,000 for a glossy page in a regional magazine. And we'd really like to take that $5,000 and split it up between all these really cool experiments locally. It's going to get broader reach, but on top of that, it's actually going to give us access to these customers for the first time. I'm talking about car dealerships, but I'm also talking about the Sacramento Kings. I'm talking about SMUD, the local municipal utility district. So there's all these kind of regional advertisers, and they make fairly large ad buys compared to the $300 to say $700 a month that you might spend with one of us, the Sacramento Press. And they also don't want to have to pay each individual site and keep tabs on reports of each individual site and have all that reporting come in separately, because they have to justify their ad buys to their managers, to their executives. So one of the pain points for all of us was, let's make a little bit more money, let's think of a different way to do it, and an ad network seemed like a good place to start. I just want to very quickly give you the frame of the ad network. And then I kind of want to go straight to questions, because I want to know what you guys want to hear about. And so the first thing is, the framework is we're working with Adify. Adify builds ad networks. So it's kind of, it's their job, it's what they're really good at. They're our technology provider, and we pay them a slice of the revenue in order to bring them on board to help us out. We're looking for 18 independent local publishers that we've already pre-selected and we think would be fantastic fits because of the quality of community that they bring together, the quality of content, and of course some site traffic. We're looking to get to 500,000 unique visitors when we conglomerate these 18, or it may only be 12 or 13. We're looking to form an advisory board so that when everybody comes together, we feel the most value is actually not in the advertising dollar, but the fact that all of us will be communicating with one another and having an actual business relationship. And even if we're mad at each other or happy with each other, or someone wants to sock me in the face because we're not selling the ads well enough, that at least there's this emotional ride that we're all taking together. I think that's going to build a healthier media ecosystem in Sacramento. And the last piece of it is we're actually looking to expand beyond an advertising network and become just a network of affiliates of something. But we don't know what that's going to be until we start communicating with each other. Maybe we're sharing content. Maybe we're collectively bargaining with larger media outlets to sell that content. Maybe we're sharing technology platforms. Maybe we're sharing more than just the ad platform, but we're sharing a couple of widgets that make sense on everybody's site, or a single sign-on, or co-promotions. So there's a whole lot we can do together, but we first have to get together in a room, and the ad network was the pain point that immediately brought us together. It's something that can pay a little bit of money. The last thing I want to say is, a lot of people have talked about this in the last few months, and the assumption has been that an ad network is no good somehow unless it can make us all enough to kind of make a living wage off of a blog. Our ad network does not presuppose that you're going to make a living wage off of your blog. And the people who are independent publishers I work with already have existing blogs, directories, and publisher outlets. They already have those. They're not making close to a living wage. They like to make their car payment. And I'm being quite literal, because when I spoke to individual publishers, the question was, can I pay my Infinity payment? And the answer generally, you know, as we calculate it so far, is yes, if we do our jobs, you should be able to make that infinity payment and not your mortgage. So it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the end game. I wanted to just talk about that specific revenue stream. I want to elicit some feedback from you. I want to take hard questions. And as I said, this is actually the first time I've spoken publicly about it. We're not issuing a press release until next week. We already have 6 of these publishers signed up. We only started signing people up on Tuesday. And we're going to go live with our first ad campaign January 15th. So this is all really new, and that's why I'm a little bit nervous. But I'm totally open for questions.
You said you have an ad campaign ready. How have advertisers responded to your promotion on this?
Well, actually, we don't have an ad campaign ready. That's our target date for the first ad campaign. I'm so ridiculously confident that we're going to have it because we're going to take an advertiser who already has committed something to the Sacramento Press. We have several advertisers with the Sacramento Press that would pay more if they got larger reach. And so we're going to talk with those who've already expressed interest in more money for larger reach and say, okay, now we have the people and we're going to go there. But nobody's lined up, and one of the reasons is we don't even know who all is in the network yet. As I said, we know 5 or 6. I can take you to a couple of their web pages, and we'll be announcing all those names on Tuesday, so you guys can all blog about it and start the conversation there. But, sorry.
How are you paying the other affiliates? Is it based on viewership?
Yeah, it's based on revenue share, and it's based on when the ads get shown on their site. So one of the reasons to work with Adify versus, say, running it yourself is Adify is in the business of kind of running ad networks. So they're really good at figuring out how to traffic certain ads to certain individual users regardless of what site they're on, count the number of times a particular ad shows up in a particular space on a particular site, and then the network can even adjust what the revenue share is by publisher and by campaign. So we could offer you a campaign at 50% revenue share, or 70% revenue share, or 40% revenue share, and you would be able to see that, we would be able to see that, the ad would be trafficked a certain way to your website. But ultimately it comes down to, if you're a publisher, and one of the ways we feel this works for us financially is that we're a publisher. I think going out and starting a local ad network isn't going to make you enough money to pay your salesperson. The numbers don't support that if you're trying to run on thin margins, which you have to recruit publishers. So you have to make money a second way, which is we're one of the publishers. So as a publisher, when I put my publisher hat on, I want to see the price per impression that I'm getting if I accept the ad that's being offered to me by the ad network. And then I want to see a really good dashboard of how many times that's showing and where, and how much my compensation is going to be at the end of the month. And I want to see all that stuff up to the minute. And that's one of the cool things that Adify takes care of. Not only do they do that, this is sounding like an advertisement for Adify, but not only do they do that, but they also will actually send out the publisher payments. So as an ad network, we collect from the advertisers, we send them money for all the different publishers in one lump sum, and they split it up. And then, of course, it should align exactly with the numbers the publishers have been seeing all along.
So who's selling their ads?
We are selling their ads. I should say we're selling the ad inventory that they decide to share with us. So we're not asking any publisher to be their exclusive ad sales team. We feel that every publisher, because we're a publisher too, should be able to sell their own in-house ads. But when we're talking about Sloan ads, the Sacramento local online advertising network ads, we feel extremely strongly that there has to be just one point of sale. Things can get really nasty and territorial. If you got a site and I got a site, you go out and sell the local Honda dealership, I go out, I'm selling the local Honda dealership, you sign them first, I say, wait, but I approached them first. And then we're fighting about it. And who gets the commission and how does that work? So I feel like if you want to make a co-op work, and this is not a co-op by the way, but if you want to make a co-op work, you have to either find an independent person who's going to be that point of sale for everybody, or you're going to have to pick one publisher and their sales team to kind of run it. I think that's the only way you do it. There has to be centralization there. One other little thing to watch out for too is, you know, if I've got an in-house ad, say for the Sacramento Kings, I may not want Sloan to be selling to the Kings because Sloan may cannibalize my business, right? The Kings may say, okay, cool, I'll buy with the ad network and I won't buy with you. And it could eat my business and actually hurt my relationships. So we're going to allow every publisher that comes on to give us a do not sell list that changes over time, where we're not going to approach their publisher or their advertisers and their partners because they've already kind of established that relationship. And in the future, we'll have a lead-in system where once we have the advisory board together, we can make common decisions like how much is a lead worth? What is the percentage commission? So that any publisher can bring in a lead for a particular advertiser and we can say, okay, that's worth a 5% commission if we are able to close this deal. That's especially important for certain advertisers for us who would probably leave the Sacramento Press if they're not able to get the kind of reach that they want. And we say, well, move on up to Sloan and stay with us. But we don't want to completely lose all of the good money that we've built a lot into that relationship. We've still got to be able to pay our salespeople for establishing that. So anyway, sorry, that was a little rambling. Anybody else? All right, cool. Well, I guess it's not that controversial. But you know, and in general, you can check out the Sacramento Press. We do sell our own ads. Just to give you some, well, I want to give a little thanks actually, since I have the chance. In order to even set up kind of the ad sales system and all the revenue systems that we have, in maybe 2004, I think, or 2005, I was making phone calls all around the country, actually to some of you, well, certainly to Jonathan, because like I love New West, and they were really, really open with their books. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's in this space for knowing that no one has it right, and just offering up really valuable business information that most corporations always keep behind walls, just because there's a need for extra experimentation. I want to thank everybody in this room for continuing that tradition today. And I want you to know that onward, if you contact me at ben@sacramentopress.com, I'll be happy to share with you prices, media kits, our revenue growth, all that type of stuff, because it's absolutely vital for our industry to figure out the business model that works. And I know I don't have it right, and we're trying out new things, and I'm hoping that you guys come to me, ask me what we're doing, improve on the idea, and share it back with me so that we can all make this thing happen. Anyway, thank you guys. I appreciate the time.
Thanks. I first met Julia Scott at USC early this year at the inaugural Night Digital Media Center Entrepreneur Boot Camp. Julia was one of the stars of the show, and that reminds me that Vicki Porter, who runs the KDMC Night Digital Media Center here at USC, is going to have another Entrepreneur Boot Camp. Monica, do you remember the date for that?
It's in mid-May.
Mid-May.
I don't know that they have that.
So this is something that you might want to put on your radar screens, because it's Julia could tell you more about it, but it's a pretty fine week-long boot camp for entrepreneurship, and I think at least my reckoning of that is that everyone at whatever level they were at got a lot out of it. But Julia at the time was kind of honing her business plan for Bargain Bay, which is up and running and very active, and Julia, tell us all about it.
Thank you, David. I definitely would endorse the boot camp. I went there in May, and I had been there a few hours, and I said, I can't believe I'm not paying for this. This is incredible. So if anybody's thinking about that, definitely check it out. So how many people here have ever worked for a startup or consider themselves an entrepreneur? Okay, excellent. And how often, or is it true that you ever think about the direction your company is going in, or where you want to be in a few years? Only one person. Wow. Okay, this is something I am constantly thinking about. My name is Julia Scott. I founded BargainBabe.com. I also write Bargain Babe LA, which is a Google mapping site, not a blog, and I also contribute to Wallet Pop and AOL blog. And I think the challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs face is really having to say no to a lot of opportunities. There's so many different things we could be doing with our time. I mean, I'm sure people come up to you and say, I love your site, you should be doing this and that. And I'm like, yeah, I know I should, but you know, there's only 24 hours in the day. So today, I'd love to use bargainbabe.com as a case study to talk about how we evaluate growth. First, let me tell you a little bit about bargainbabe.com. It's a blog that helps people save money on everyday expenses like groceries, gasoline, your household bills, school, Christmas, all kinds of stuff. Since we launched in January, we've had a lot of successes. Income has been growing, of course, never as quickly as I would like, but single-digit growth. Some decent traffic numbers, nice, healthy email subscriber base, and I've had a lot of great luck getting publicity. I've been mentioned and featured in the Washington Post, the LA Times, and most recently on Good Morning America on Wednesday, I did a piece about insider secrets to warehouse shopping. So if you're a Costco fan, come talk to me afterwards. People always ask me what are my revenue streams, how I make money, so I listed a few of them here. Advertising, selling content. I have a weekly column in the New Jersey Star Ledger, and affiliate revenue or e-commerce. If you're not familiar with that, salon.com just started doing that. I think they announced that a few days ago. That's a great, I think, untapped revenue stream for a lot of online sites. And then there's a few other revenue streams. But I do have a problem, which is that I'm being pulled in so many different directions. I have a lot of opportunities, and I'm always sort of evaluating the different areas I could grow in. And I really see 6 different possibilities. And from the presentations I've already heard today, it seems like a lot of other people are thinking about these things too. I've heard people say, like, you know, I really need to hire an advertiser or a sales staff. There's a lot of different opportunities we have, and I personally am bootstrapping my business, so it really is about how many hours in the day do I have. These are some of the options, and I'll go quickly through the pros and cons. Hiring somebody, which means I can get a lot more done, but it's a huge drain on my income. Sort of go the legal route and increase the sale value, but unfortunately not contribute to really major indicators like traffic or revenue. Then there's syndication. The column in the Star Ledger is just for New Jersey, so I could easily expand that to newspapers in other markets. Merging. I've had a lot of interest from investors who have varied ideas of what to do with bargainbabe.com, from turning it into a major e-commerce site. Sorry.
That would just be a little bit better.
Okay. I don't like to stand behind the podium, but all right. So there's a quick payoff to merging, to selling the site, but of course then I lose ownership, and I become an employee again. There's also revenue. Go straight for the advertising. Consider even hiring somebody to do sales with me. This is a major time suck and would take away from a lot of the other opportunities out there. And then publishing. People frequently ask me, when are you going to have a book? And it's great. Books are great for credibility, but they're really not a moneymaker. So these are just some of the 6 options that I'm considering, and I think a lot of other people might be considering them here. And I'd love to hear from other people, what are other growth opportunities that you might be considering or that a young company might be considering?
You sound like you're really good at getting publicity.
Mm-hmm.
Have you considered kind of being a little bit of a PR person or a social media consultant for other companies or anyone I have contact with, and say, look, this is how I've done it for my own thing. I can do this for you.
I've thought about that tangentially, but I'm more interested in building bargainbabe.com than getting revenue from other gigs that, you know, I'm really sort of looking for growth opportunities for Bargain Babe. But I was wondering if there are other growth opportunities that other people are considering out there for their own sites.
Just wondering about the syndication. What do you mean it's slow growth?
In terms of, I'd have to put together a sales kit, pitch a syndicate. I actually, previously in my old career as a reporter for the LA Daily News, I had a syndication contract for 10 years with Universal Press Syndicate, and I turned it down to go off on my own and launch bargainbabe.com. So going through that process of getting on board with the syndicate and signing the contract, and then, you know, the turnaround time it takes for them to put together a sales kit to pitch to all their newspapers, you know, in 6 months would probably be the soonest you would actually get your column syndicated in another newspaper. So it's this sort of slow growth, but could be fairly consistent once you do build it.
Well, of course,
Part of our model at San Diego News Network is to expand into different markets. As you get scale, the revenue comes with it, provided you've got systems for doing that.
Right, that's a great option, scaling to other markets, assuming that your startup costs aren't going to outweigh that. Okay, so we've got a few more sort of growth opportunities that we all might be weighing. And I'd love to ask you all to put yourself in my shoes for a few seconds, or maybe think about the company that you're working with, and which of the growth opportunities would you choose? And keep in mind that my goal is to sell my site relatively soon, and I think that's a goal for a lot of other people. So again, the opportunities are add employees, go the legal route, pursue syndication, consider selling, focus really on advertising and boosting the revenue, and then publishing. I'm curious, and here's where I'm trying to convince myself to sing the Jeopardy music. While you all choose, what would be your #1 priority?
The easiest thing that doesn't require for accountants is to build the traffic, because that's what America traditionally sees as value. So the other things all require more money or losing control or some combination of the two.
So you would build value sort of indirectly by building traffic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd build your registered, your mailing list size as a very tangible thing that somebody could. You have a very clear goal, which is an exit. With that exit, the most clear way of proving that, I don't know what the loyalty of your readers are, repeat usages, but the value of the mail list is the one tangible thing in terms of the site that you have that can be, that somebody's going to find ROI on in terms of selling it.
Okay, so you think an attractive element would be the mailing list, sort of the marketing information?
Yeah, that's going to be easier. It's going to be more tangible for somebody to invest in than traffic, unless you have high repeat usage and page use. So portal for and occasional hits is not going to get you that.
Okay. Okay.
I'll give you information. Trademark it now, so if you're going to sell it, you have to own the rights to that.
Right.
So I think that's pretty important for anyone else grabs that to a certain extent, or maybe like for different. Someone said Bargain Babe, LA, Bargain Babe, San Diego. Get them all when you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you had something else?
I just wanted to. I mean, the other complete option is you as the commodity versus the site, and selling yourself and letting the site. I mean, in terms of you as a personality, that would go,
more like the brand.
Do you as a brand is the other thing.
Right.
So that was.
And selling that to another company who's
Well,
interested
just
in having a brand.
If you pursued books and other branding of your voice, then you're going to find a diverse set of revenue streams available to you over your life. A book won't make you any money, but it'll get you speaking appearances. You'll get a speakers bureau. You'll get this. The syndicate will come to you. You don't have to market to them, and so forth. So, I think you can pull either off. You seem to really. Okay. Or both.
I don't really have advice for you, but I'm wondering, why do you want an exit strategy? Why is it important to you to get out quickly? Because everybody here is trying to get in quickly, so I was curious.
I guess partly because I think it would be great to sell a company, partly because I don't see myself doing this forever. In 10 years, I don't still want to be writing about bargains. So I'm trying to focus on that goal with a sort of understanding that it's probably going to take me longer to get there than I'm projecting. And so it's something I want to work towards.
Do you want to do something else?
Eventually, yeah. Yeah, but perhaps another business. Like one of the great things I picked up from the boot camp, somebody said, you guys are all really emotionally invested in your business, but a lot of them are going to fail. So don't think of it as your business, think of it as your first business. And so after that, I was kind of like, oh, wow, I can do a lot of other things. So then that sort of led me down the route of, well, if I want to do other things, I'm eventually going to have to sell.
Do you know how much you'd want?
We can talk later. You had a question?
More of a comment. I think if there is one thing that I think probably connects most of us in the room, it would be the desire to have something that has longevity. And I think that if you're thinking about perhaps selling or getting out of it, making sure that to a potential suitor that it's long-term. It's not something that is going to disappear with you. It kind of goes back to that, is it you that you're marketing or is it the site that you're marketing? If the site has longevity built into it, then
right, so is the brand separate than the site? separate from the site because
Well,
you're selling the brand, and obviously I come attached.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I just always leave. You have to be sustainable past the founder if you're making an acquisition.
Yeah, past you, the person.
Yeah. Right. That's why this. Can I ask you a question? Sure. Since you've asked, I gave you. I'm just wondering. One of the things I'm very impressed with is your traffic numbers. It's very impressive. I suspect it's because the content is terrific, which I love the message. I like good content matters. But I find a lot of people get terrific press, but it doesn't translate into traffic. And you have some good traffic, and I'm just wondering how you built that. 3,200.
Well, that's an interesting question because
if you're telling me it translates, that's great, but it never does. So.
You know, it doesn't translate that well. Like, for instance, the Good Morning America thing. They have a policy about not mentioning the actual URL. Yeah. So they mentioned Bargain Babe website. I'm like, okay, thank you. But luckily they had linked to me on the little accompanying story. And I was surprised at how little traffic converted.
How hard do you work to get the traffic that you have? I guess that's the question. On the distribution side of what you do.
I would say that for this first 6 months of my business, and I launched in January, I really focused on the traffic. I had a built-in boost because I had a similar blog at the LA Daily News, and I had a good chunk of my readers from there, from the email list and readership I'd built there, follow me. But, I mean, I think establishing traffic is a very important barometer for a news site, and you've really got to focus on that at first.
And if you were to take your time as a journalist doing a blog and divvy up between the content creation versus the distribution, I want to do this story, but now I have to go out and find people who care and tell them about it. How would you break your time down?
That's a great question. I would say the time that I actually create content is anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day, and the rest of it is dealing with advertisers, like online networking, building traffic. The email inbox is a constant monster that I'm fighting. All the other tasks that come up.
And how do you sell? What's your technique?
This is embarrassing, but all of the advertising I sell is because people come to me. I've never actually, I have like an email that I respond to people with describing my ads and the rates that I email back, but I've been incredibly lucky to get a lot of notice from potential advertisers.
Well, you've done what every site wants to do. Jonathan mentioned that they're at the point where they get people calling now. Yeah. But you've reached that point where people say, I like this, I want to advertise it. That's what everybody wants to get to.
And that's why I think actually approaching advertisers could be really lucrative, because I've already gotten a good response from people who find me. I don't know about anybody else, but my background is as a journalist, and so I come from the creative side, and so the business side is this really satisfying but challenging monster that I'm always.
But also very creative.
It's creative. Yeah.
It is. I mean, you have to be creative, and one of the things I've found success with is always being open to changing the types of advertising I offer, the rates, being flexible. You have to be open to what your readers will tolerate and actually consume, and what the advertisers want.
Let's make this the last one.
Okay.
Just one last one. I happen to teach business school. You call a case study, get the students to create your business side of your business, because you're good at what you do on this side. You just need the business side and you're done.
You mean at USC?
Any school.
Oh,
I
okay.
teach at another university, but yeah, at USC.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you.
It's free.
That's true. I like that. It's a bargain.
Bargain.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.